So in this video, what we're going to learn how to do is to use the data coming from our air temperature sensor to control our LED strip. So for example, if our temperature gets too hot, our LED strip is going to turn red or a certain color that we decide, right? And to do this, we're going to use the same materials that we have been using. We're going to use our Grove shield, we're going to use our microbit, our temperature humidity sensor, our little screen so we can see the data, and we're going to use our two 4-pin wires, our LED strip, and our USB cable, again, so we can connect our microbit to our computer. Now, rather than starting from scratch, we're going to use one of our already existing programs. And we're going to go back and use the one where we created our air humidity data program. All right. So anytime that you're in MakeCode and you have your account set up, it will save it. So now I've got my program here where I've got my show data. It's showing my air temperature and humidity data on my screen. I'm getting my data in this function of get data. That's getting my air temperature and my humidity. And I'm calling those data in my forever loop, okay, with my call functions. Now, what we want to do is we're going to create a new function. And we're going to call this function do something, okay? Or use data, something like that. Because we're going to use the data to cause an event to happen, okay? This is part of where automation starts to come in. Collecting the data and knowing about the data is great, right? It's better than not knowing it, but we also want to use that data to do something. So now what I want to do is we've just learned how to add in our LED strip. So I'm going to go back into my extensions. I'm going to add my LED block. There it is, my NeoPixel block. Okay, and that was in our last video. And we have to, again, remember, we have to put our set strip NeoPixel. It's going to go on pin 2. And it has 30 LEDs. That has to go in our start block. If you do not have your set strip in your on start block, you're going to get an error. Okay. So now let's use the fact that I have an LED strip in my on start block to do something with the data. Now, to do something with the data, I'm going to need to create a different type of variable. Okay? I'm going to need to create something known as a threshold variable, or a variable at which I want something to happen. So let's say I want to worry about my temperature. So I'm going to make a variable. I'm going to call that variable high temp. Okay, so there's my high temp variable. Now, in my use data, I'm going to set my high temp variable to, let's say, 27 degrees Celsius. Okay. And 27 degrees Celsius is roughly, doing a little calculator on the other screen here, is about 80 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's actually pretty warm for our plants. Okay, so let's leave it for right now. We can change that later. Okay. Now, I've got my threshold variable. Now I need to compare it to something. I'm going to compare that to my air temperature variable. What we need now is we need our logic block. Our logic is where our if-then statements live. Okay? So notice at the very top where I've got this if true then and this if true then else. We're going to take this second block here and I'm going to drag it into my use data block. Okay? So now what I need to do is I need to compare something. Okay? So right now this is just saying if a condition is true, do X. Okay? But what I want to do is I want to compare two things, or two numbers. So under comparison, see where I've got these little comparison blocks where I've got a 0 equals something to 0? Alright? So I'm going to drag this block and replace the true. Now, what do I want to compare? I want to know if my air temperature, the actual reading from my sensor, is that higher or less than my high temp value? So I'm going to go to my variables. I'm going to drag in air temp. Okay. And I'm going to drag in my high temp. So now I'm going to say if my air temperature, so the temperature from my sensor, is greater than, right, I can click on my little down arrow and I get some choices. If that temperature is higher than what I think is safe for my plants, and right now I've got it 80 degrees, what I want to have happen is I need my LED strip to turn red. Okay, so now I'm going to go to my NeoPixel block. I'm going to show my strip to be red. Okay. Now, if that condition is false or not true, I can have my NeoPixel. Say I want it to turn green, because green's usually a happy color, right? It means that things are okay, right? Green for go, red for stop. Okay. So if it's red, I need to do something about it. Okay. So there is my program for my use data. But now what I have to do is I need to get that use data function in my forever loop. So I go back to my functions. I'm going to drag my call use data over into my forever loop. Okay. So now my forever loop is going to get my data, get it from over here. It's going to show the data on my screen, and then it's going to do something with the data. Okay. Now you could rotate these, right, if you wanted to. You could have it use the data first to light up the LED strip first before you see the data on the screen. That's completely your call as a programmer. Do you want to see the visualization before you see the data on the screen? Okay. It doesn't matter on whichever way that you would like to do it. That's the nice thing about programming. You're the programmer. So now let's wire things up. And I'm going to do this again from scratch again, just to make sure that we get everything right. Is our screen only goes into I2C port. Okay. My temperature sensor goes into P0. Okay. And my LED strip is going into P2. Okay. Now I need to download my program to my microbit. So let's plug in my microbit. My lights are on. Everything's good. There my computer sees it. Let's click downloads. Okay. So now I need to go to my downloads. Okay. I need to find my file, and usually it's the newest file. All right, so I called it air humidity data again. All right, so I put a little 1 on it. So that's my latest file. I'm going to drag that to my microbit. Let me find, there's my microbit. So let's drag and drop it. There's my little yellow light blinking. Okay, now we can unplug our microbit. We are going to plug our microbit into our shield, and now I am going to plug in my shield. Okay, and now let's see what I am going to get. I've got my data here coming in. So right now it looks like my air temperature is pretty good. It's 24 in here, and the humidity is 21. Okay, so let's see if we can change that. Let's see if we can get my temperature up to 27 degrees. Ready? I'm going to breathe on my temperature sensor. All right. My temperature is now up to 24 degrees. I must not be a very warm individual. Oh, I'm up at 26. Still at 26. My humidity's at 100 though. Alright. There we go. I got the 29 degrees and my LED strip turned red. Okay. So now I should be able to cool my temperature sensor down, and waving it should get it back down. And there we are. I am green again, and my temperature on my little screen says it's just turned 27. And so it's probably going to be like 25 this time. All right. So now I've got my data controlling my LED. Right, so you could have your data set up, right, where the temperature goes and your LED strip could be blinking red, right, if you really wanted to get your attention. You guys can experiment and play with what kind of signals that you want to have when your temperature gets a certain level.